All right, it's 6:00. We'll get this meeting called to order. So I can't see Scott, but you said he's online?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Scott Kendall, David Martin, Lisa Sanders, Arbel, myself. So we do have a quorum. Is there any other board members online? Jeff or Julie? All right. So next is looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, the itinerary stands. Motion to approve the minutes from the August 7th meeting. I will be abstaining. Yeah.
I did not notice anything when I read through them, so
No, they look good.
I will make a motion to approve the August 7th regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. That brings us to our first public comments. Anybody? Yeah. All right, that brings us to governance, the draft review, the annual agenda. This tiny little one.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to see online, so it's in that shared folder always. So you can send and blow it up.
At least forgot about the computer. Shoot. Good work with this.
Only thing that's changed since the last rendition is we kind of ramped up the location of where we're looking at the EL policies to make it happen a little bit more frequent, so that hopefully we can get through them all for the end of the year.
EL.
Executive limitations. Yeah, sorry about that. And so what'll be happening is each month you will be in the second read of one set and the first read of another.
A minute to review the calendar
And they,
or the agenda.
Yes. the other parts and pieces on there are just the typical stuff that comes up the year that are periodic, but we have to do anyway.
I think that, I think it looks good. I like that it's
Predictable.
right, predictable, and it reminds us all of sort of the things coming up and I think this has probably been a document somewhere in somebody else's brain and now it's more public, and I like that. Obviously we can add to it or whatever. Yeah, right.
Any other discussion about it?
And so there's columns for the, what, two of the school, and I understand the columns. There's a CTS column.
Where the meeting's being held.
Oh, that's where, okay. It's okay.
You scared me.
Okay, I'm sorry. All right. I'll only note that under today's meeting, it's ever to discuss budget parameters. We're going to do that?
You haven't approved this draft agenda.
Okay. But I think in general, it's a good thing to be doing that in September. Even though it means that somebody has to work on them during August.
One of the things that'll be useful for that is letting me know what that means to you in terms of budget parameters. Because in some districts, it's the superintendent coming in and saying, okay, this is the educational and funding environment that's out there right now. These are the challenges we're going to face. In other districts, I've seen the board come in and say, we want you to work towards the board's ends, but we're going to limit you to a 3% increase overall. So just throw that out there.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I guess what personally would be interesting to me would be your projection of what you think the current services budget, would look like. Okay? And so, if you come in and say the current services are going to be up 20%, then the board's going to start saying, whoa, this is going to be a problem. If you say it's a number that, right? And then over the course of the fall, you work out the details, but that means that we're all understanding where we're starting from. Does that make sense?
Sure.
We can have that up and ready to go for, easy enough.
Any more discussion about the draft agenda? Good.
It's a good idea, good thing.
Scott's, like I said, I can't see Scott, so I don't know if there's any cans or anything.
Don't see any.
Okay. So so then it's kind of under board goals. We have monitoring organization. Or is that just your?
So the board goals.
Oh, no, it doesn't. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, that moves us into monitoring organization. Sorry, I thought it was continuation.
So that one was just a question and we can take it off. Some boards develop goals for the board itself for the year, whether it's educational priorities, whether it's ownership linkage, how is the board itself going to connect with the public? Things like that. It's not something that has to be done, but they just threw it in there to bring it up in case there was any interest or any thought about it.
A couple of things that came up at the Green Mountain meeting were one about onboarding people onto the board and what kind of educational priorities and resources we would want for that. And then another one was the community outreach piece and setting up a calendar of events that people could attend and we get input from other people. So those to me are reasonable and good board goals. They in some ways make less sense for this board because our communities are at the local Mount Holly or Green Mountain level, and onboarding, we're already being onboarded onto another board before we would be here. So I don't see any additional goals for this board.
I think to what you just said, though, there is some like a quick once over about kind of catch up to where we are and the things that have been on our plate that isn't always transferable. And the other thing, and I'll bring it up, but Dave probably will if I don't, just really keeping an eye on what's going on at the state level as far as the impact to our community and getting community involved prior to the state telling us what we have to do, and hopefully being a little preemptive in fighting for what we believe in. But I don't even know what that would look like at this point because I don't know what, but
I think that sort of thing though could then be parsed back out to the different boards because our districts are different, our communities are different. So then we'll be bringing back that information.
it's just
But I do like
going
the
to
idea of
happen
the-
at this level,
Yeah.
right? Like it's going to probably happen at the
Yeah.
supervisory union level, not the district level. That's why I think it's important to this. Yes, our input is different, but I think this is the group that's going to hold that impact the most.
So do you want to add, so instead of not necessarily like a community outreach per se from the TRSU level, but maybe an update on the community outreach from the different boards to this board? That'd be, I don't know what you're talking about.
And perhaps recommendations to the individual boards. I mean, if we as the union note something that we think the boards ought to do, and of course, there's a chat where we have one. But I can imagine going both ways.
Yeah, in that same vein, maybe some interaction between the Green Mountain Board and the Mount Holly Board, or the districts who are sending people to this board. I mean, we basically see each other at meetings and not otherwise, but something like the Green Mountain members of this board actually going to Mount Holly Elementary School and, seeing what it is, or some additional interaction might help to bridge how different the two districts can be.
Yes, and I guess my thing is I'm very fearful about rumors and misinformation, and if we can be ahead of that, I guess that's really more. I just feel like there's going to be a lot of things flying around that we're not going to have any control of, and I don't know if we can be preemptive about educating our public. I guess maybe that's the better way to say what I was thinking. But yes, all of that is great too.
And the idea, I think, is a good one, because the stakeholders of this board, they are all the communities, but they're technically the closest stakeholders you've got are the two levels, right? So those are the people that you would be checking in with and making your kind of visiting plan with, and then making sure that we're supporting the way that they need.
So I guess how do we, if that's gonna be a goal, if we want to talk about developing this goal, how do you envision that goal? Because usually goals have to be somewhat organized and measurable. Not that I don't think we really need to measure that, but there needs to be some sort of structure.
Yeah, I think this would be a developing these maybe two things, if I'm hearing them correctly, into goals that we could consider at the next meeting rather than trying to do it right now. But one being that providing information to the boards and or communities, and the other being interaction between the two districts. I don't know if you want to assign that pulling together to people, but, or.
I'm just trying to board communication and board interactions. I do want to be careful that just when you said making recommendations to boards, I don't know. I think that can be a slippery slope, but I think sending accurate information down to the two boards is the best. Okay, all right, so if you guys want to think on how that would look, then we can readdress that at the next meeting. Good? Good. All right. Moving on to monitoring organizations. I don't know, I think I did that at the last meeting too. Like I just, for some reason, I'm bringing governance into the next one, so sorry about that. This brings us into the superintendent's reports.
So I did put the report in. Things are a little bit late because of all the report writing for the executive limitations. So most of that's an easy read. It's talking about the start of the school year. It's talking about the actual work that the leadership team is engaged in right now. I think one of the things that I'd like to just talk about for a few minutes is separate from that is kind of, the state level redistricting. We did have the open forums, one for Ludlow Mount Holly. We had one for the Green Mountain side as well, to talk with the communities, to give them some information about, what redistricting might look like, what the impacts might be. And then to start, we had a pretty good facilitated discussion and got a lot of information. So the process right now is to take all those ideas and things that folks feel it's important for the redistricting committee to know, put them together into a draft letter that will go out towards the end of September for community input, finalize it, and get it off to the redistrict committee by end of September, first week of October at the latest. So that is flowing. But one of the things that I was able to do for the Green Mountain meeting that I was not able to do for the Ludlow Mount Holly, because finding the data was tough, was some calculations based upon the law about, what things are potentially going to look like. And there's 3 or 4 that I think it's important for the community to know and to start getting prepared for and to communicate with us about as we draft that letter to the redistricting committee. Based upon the way the law is structured, this idea of having 4,000 to 8,000 students per district, that means that the 119 current districts within the state of Vermont would be reduced down to somewhere between 9 to 18. Depending upon whether it's leaning towards the 8,000 and 4,000. So that's important for folks to know.
And is that specifically districts or is it supervisory unions?
A supervisory union, you would still the supervisory, I would say, you think of it like the district.
Mm-hmm.
The supervisory union would have that 4,000 to 8,000, wouldn't it? Yeah, so it's a good question. Based upon the strict math in the state, I looked at the middle. Because of the size difference and the population density differences between the north and the south. So the assumption here is that there's probably going to be about 13 districts. Based upon that, the size of each district would be 711 square miles, everything being equal. We know it's not. We know the districts up in Chittenden County are going to be much smaller, and the ones down here are going to be much larger. Just for comparison, make sure I got my exact numbers here. Green Mountain Union School District right now is 129 square miles, although Mount Holly is 44. So we're talking about potentially changing that to 711 or higher, most likely higher. So important for folks to know. I think what's really important for the teachers and the staff to know is that when the law went through, they were selling the savings about it would happen because of the consolidation of the districts, like Act 46. You're going to have fewer central office personnel. The reality is the piece that they didn't talk about was the impact on the teachers. So given their minimum class size requirements that are a part of the law, there are 8,000 teachers in the state of Vermont. There are about 6,400 that are direct classroom teachers. Based upon their numbers, at a minimum, they're going to have to lay off 1,402. And so I do not think the teachers associations are aware of it.
Mr. Panassi, if you're in the building, can you please come to the office?
I don't think teachers themselves are aware of it. I don't think the boards are aware of it. So I think it's important to get that information out and what that potential impact might look at. My biggest concern is the superintendents and the central offices are the ones that are going to have to carry out those works in terms of the personnel shifts and changes. That'll be our job before we're cut. There is no safety net that the state has built for these people. You know, it's one thing to cut people and have a plan in place to make sure that they get a nice transition and they land on their feet. There has been no discussion or talk about that. So that's a deep concern for me just as a human being, other human beings. The actual savings, yeah, go ahead.
Can you say anything about the flexibility in the law? I feel like I don't understand that very well. There seems to be exceptions to these numbers, exceptions to the minimum size requirements, those kinds of things, but I don't feel like I have a good understanding of that or where that may land in the actuality. So I don't want us to panic if the reality is going to be, oh, well, yes, but 75% of the state is going to fit into an exception, at least for the next 10 years. And
it would be better if I can do a specific report on that. My remembrance and glancing through it is it was kind of wishy-washy. If I were to take a stab at why it's in there, is they probably figured it was a way to get the law to pass without people freaking out too much about kind of the real intent of things, right? If you think things are going to be okay and you think that right up until the last minute and then they're not, that's a different set of people that the legislature is going to have to deal with then if they know it's coming all along.
Are you saying that the perception of this like flexibility is maybe not all that real?
If I were a betting man in Vegas, that's what I would say. So I don't know for sure, but it looks like it was in there. I think there's some intentionality to it because there are some that it would be reasonable for, especially depending upon remoteness. But I think a lot of it was to hopefully try to keep tensions down leading into this thing.
In regards to the 1400.
And maybe only answer this, I think two areas where the flexibility, one is it says 4,000 to 8,000 where practical. Okay. And so if it's going to be too far, if the districts are spread too wide, then in my view, it wouldn't be practical. If it's a long drive from the superintendent's office to one of the school's not going to get the services that they ought to get, and it's not practical. But it's up to the commission and the legislature to decide what it means by where practical. And the second piece of flexibility that I see is that the commission's going to come up with up to 3 recommendations, and then the legislature is going to have to act before any of them take effect. And so there's a second bite at the apple in effect. If boards and parents, people don't like what the commission comes up with, it's certainly possible that the legislature could fail to adopt anything.
But it's just as a thoughtful kind of argument, there would be no reason to put the law into effect with the provisions that it has if the intent was to let everybody have an out. So, right, if everybody's got an out, then why do the law at all? There is an intent to carry out the provisions there. So the question is how serious are they about granting those waivers and allowing this to happen? I don't know.
Right. I mean, could they decide, for example, in a more rural area, instead of 4 to 8,000, 3,000 is enough?
Yeah.
And nobody knows any of that yet. But so they also, what kinds of issues did people bring up at the community meeting?
A lot of the ones that we've talked about, I think the biggest one that came up at both was the idea of the local voice, I think was the biggest concern, which is legitimate. And there was a lot of discussion of the Green Mountain. I think that was one of the larger ones about, who would be making the decisions? How would this work? Because that was so much of a concern. We talked a little bit about, what the potential savings would be, the potential savings if all those teachers were cut and the associated central office staff were cut. It'll cut the $2.7 billion state budget for education by 6%, which for the average taxpayer who's paying $6,000 for their taxes each year, you're going to see a $340 drop in taxes for all this change. So then the question becomes, is that significant enough to go through this, or are we better off trying to find a better way of doing it?
Well, and I think for some people it is really significant, and that matters, but is there going to be an equal increase in transportation costs and substitute costs when, a teacher is an hour away from where the school is, and lost attendance costs because the kids are so far away, and if they get sick, they can't be picked up, and all of those kinds of things. Yeah.
And we touched on the idea too. The busing was, and obviously the travel was probably the second largest concern. But we touched on the idea that the busing issue in the state of Vermont has been here for a while now, and the state has not moved to do anything to ameliorate that. I can also state other places where it's been difficult. We are required to have driver's ed in our high schools. There is no program in the state of Vermont that prepares teachers to teach driver's ed. And so these are the same people that we are having faith in terms of making sure that we've got the buses and the bus drivers that we need, to be able to make those long trips, because the requirement is that the number of buses and drivers that you need is going to go away. And there's no mechanism that I see that they can actually accomplish that. Just thoughts and ideas. But those were the biggest pieces. The board will get a copy of the draft letter as well. My hope is, yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I was just curious if you ever found any information on like independent schools, how they were going to be affected to this.
So that's going to be in for your Green Mountain. We kind of talked about, I was going to pull that together. I was hoping actually to get some parts and pieces of it together for this, but the amount of write-up for the executive limitations, when you guys get to those, are going to understand why. So I do apologize, but it will be there for the Green Mountain meeting.
Thank you.
You say a word or two about enrollment, and not the level of detail we'll get at the individual board meetings, but how's our total number of kids compare to last year?
State-wise, they're down.
In the union, supervisory union.
We're about steady state. I did a longitudinal, so I could probably find it and give it to people of what was happening in the populations across the different schools and across the district as a whole. So there's fluctuations, right? There's actually pretty wide fluctuations from year to year, but the overall trend line is about flat. With notable exceptions, one of the reasons it's flat is that Chester seems to be on a bit of a growth. But no, we're pretty much steady state here and have been for a while. The state, on the other hand, trying to remember what the previous year's numbers was. I believe it was 80,000. They're down to 67,000 this year in terms of students, at least from the data that I can pull. Some good questions. But that's, in a nutshell, I think the important pieces that I wanted to share, especially if we're going into trying to generate communications to the redistricting.
One other brief thing, at either a supervisory union or district level, is there a way to know the number of kids in of public education age versus the number enrolled in our schools?
It should be available, because the assumption is that if you are not in the public school, you're either being homeschooled, which we all get information on. So they've at least got the numbers and the names somewhere. They don't give us the names, they might give us the numbers. The private school piece, a lot of them are probably taking advantage of school choice to go there, so we could get that number. So it won't be all of them, but it would be a good majority.
Yeah, that just seems helpful in terms of thinking about how big changes are going to affect numbers. Given that it could, I suppose, potentially draw more people back in if these bigger, better schools with lots of offerings actually happen, but it could also very much go the other way. If people have any other option, they may take them.
And remember, there's a minimum of $6 billion of repairs needed across all the buildings in the state of Vermont. So while this consolidation might rearrange where the kids are going, it still is not going to solve that fundamental problem that is untouched by this law.
And you can't move 1,000 kids into a building that's already in disrepair and expected to.
Or PCBs, lead problems,
Yeah,
black mold.
and there aren't these bigger, better schools to move kids into.
Yes.
But there are a few more limitations on which schools those who have choice can choose to attend. So they won't be able to go to St. Joseph anymore.
Yeah, that's the question that Scott is posing is, what's the impact on independent schools? It got stricter in the end, but I'll be able to pull the details together for the Green Mountain meeting. Yeah.
Well, and everybody's grandfather. If you went to St. Joseph as a seventh grader last year, you can stay till 12th grade based on the current law.
Okay, all right, let's move forward. Moving into facilities report.
Oh, yeah, look at some of the pieces of paper. Sorry. So Todd sent over Mount Holly. He and I had talked about getting some estimates. So he's saying he'll be meeting with the contractor on September 5th. The estimates that they're going to look at, there's two, right? The priority is the roof at Mount Holly. One of the estimates is, okay, what is it just to repair things that need to be repaired, and how long will those repairs hold us before we've got to do something else? And then the second one is what's the cost of the complete repair? And so September 5th, he's going to be connecting with folks, which is tomorrow, and hopefully start to get some numbers in there. The PFAS project has been approved, and bids will be going out with potential construction to begin this spring. Window project at Ludlow Elementary School here where we sit was completed on time and on budget. All other projects are completed on time. Cavendish Town Elementary School summer work was completed on time. Boilers were serviced and all inspections were complete. And I guess the other big one for Cavendish is that they got their final approval. They thought they were going to have to wait for the final step of the approval for the preschool program. They got it just before school started. So they are.
Yes, they started the day after Labor Day, right?
They are good to go. Chester Andover, one of the things that's happening is that the obvious areas for new construction are now based upon the floodplain maps underwater. And so they've got a crew that's going to come out, do a little bit of surveying, determine what the elevation levels are, which parts of that land are actually within the floodplain and are outside of it, to provide information back to where they can actually do that additional construction and where they can't. Or if they do it in a certain location where they have to build the elevation up, what is the cost of that going to be and how much is that going to reduce what we have to spend on building the actual extra space that they're looking for. Green Mountain, PCB testing obviously is ongoing. The filters are working as they should. And they're hoping that the costs and the amounts that we're able to get from the state to begin remediation there are done by spring 2026. One of the ideas that came up in the discussions was, instead of going for all the money that's needed to remediate PCBs, was to start kind of a priority. Hey, maybe we can get one floor done. Because they didn't put a lot of money aside for this remediation, and then go after it again after the floor is done, and they allocate more money at the end. So that's one of the things they're looking at as well. The fire alarm project is complete, up and running. Folks that were at the last meeting saw the construction folks running around doing that work. The door project is nearly complete. They finally have all the doors on site, and they should be installed in the next week or so.
And there was a fire alarm that went off at GM and checked out by the, it worked and was evaluated by the Chester Fire Department and let people back in.
Yeah, they did. They got to give the fire crew, a lot of credit. They've police as well. Because with interactions last year, they're great. They come out, they do their thing. They work with us. They often have a debrief afterwards with the administrative team. What worked, what didn't, what could be better. So it's a good thing. They're good people to work with.
But I don't think the facilities report was in the packet.
No, he emailed it this morning.
Okay, can you add it?
Yeah, I can drop the email.
Thanks.
I'm gonna make sure I've got the notes. Gotcha.
Thanks.
It's the curriculum report.
So Luisa.
Hello, thank you for having me. Can you give me sharing rights?
Okay.
I'm going to present you the outline of the work done in the summer and some upcoming work and a little bit of data.
You should be good.
Perfect. Can you see my screen?
Good.
Yes, okay, so let me minimize this one. And let's see if I can move this bar a little higher. Perfect. Here we go. Thank you so much again for having me. I'm gonna show you a little bit of the work we have done. And I need to, just a second, it froze on me.
The first switch over on slides, once you hit it, if you wait about 30 seconds, it'll go. I don't know why it does that, but that seems to be a common issue.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. So very quickly, this slide to introduce my report. I'm going to talk about the summer leadership retreat, the new higher orientation, and then a little bit of the reopening day and some other initiatives like the assessment calendar that's already been posted on the website. So let's look at the details. During the summer leadership retreat which was on August, between August 4th and 7th, we covered the following topics. We revamped the job description and the expectations for the school leaders, with more emphasis on the work done in every school and taking on additional projects, leading PLCs and coordinating with the principals, some other projects, mainly helping leading MTSS data teams, helping with coaching and mentoring, and other expectations that are embedded in the job description. We ironed out together the professional development calendar for the year. We will split those in-service days with a model of 2 days for district in service, training, and 3 days will be building based. And also at the school level, all the principals are coordinating the different efforts and the different professional development opportunities in terms of providing time for the teachers to collaborate across the different schools, and hosting training that will be of interest of longitudinally for different grades. We have had the Forefront Consortium showing 2 different presentations, one targeting the leaders and the other one was for strictly for administrators, on how to extrapolate data from Forefront. And then we had the official launch of the new MTSS process. As you know from my previous presentations, we do have a coach. Her name is Audrey Richardson. Audrey was present both at the admin meeting and the leadership meeting, introducing herself to the different leaders and offering them her help and expertise to conduct MTSS meetings and help leaders facilitate those meetings by modeling it for them, or just be present at the meeting and then providing feedback on how the meeting was going, issues she noticed, and so forth. I will continue to meet with Audrey monthly, and we will coordinate this one also at the district level. We have identified the dates for the next leadership team meetings. We decided to have bi-monthly afternoon meetings, and we will coordinate the topics that we will cover together with the input from the school leaders. We had a presentation about how to keep track of student behavior and how we will be able to analyze data once the data is properly put into the system. And that was from the assistant principal of Chester Andover, Nicole Laz, and then we had additional updates. The following week, on the days of August 11th through 14th, we hosted the new higher orientation, and we had about 24 people between teachers, specialists, and paraeducators. And we did a different model this year. We prolonged the new higher. Yes? I'm sorry.
There's something in my case.
Okay. Let me know if you have a question, because I have the full screen with the PowerPoint. So if there is a question, I wouldn't know. Sorry for that. Please stop me anytime. New higher orientation. So we used a different model this year. We have identified, if you remember, at the end of the year, the school year, in June, when I did my other presentation, we have conducted some surveys of the new hire from last year, and they have identified a little need for additional training on the curricular resources that we have adopted at the district level, because they felt that they would have benefited from this additional training before stepping into the classroom. So with the use of CFP money, so the federal funds, we were able to offer 2 additional days of orientation, targeting specifically those curricular resources, especially for literacy and math, with the help and the coaches from the vendors who explained directly to the teachers how to access all those resources online, how to do the best use of those resources, and how to tap into their online support for any questions. And then we covered other topics which I believe they're very important for any new teacher starting to work for TRSU. We went over the EQS standards. We spoke about the federal funds and the accountability system, and how we need to report to the state measures of our progress. We became familiar with the school continuous improvement plans. We went over the assessment calendar. I spent some time showing a crosswalk that was published by the Agency of Education between IEPs, 504s, PLPs, EST, and so forth, because as you know, especially new teachers may not have seen the language, may not understand the difference between those plans. And I remember the feedback from one of the teachers who told me that very bluntly that they have never heard of personalized learning plans before. So I think these are all things that we need to discuss. We need to be very clear about our goals and what is important when working for TRSU. We went over the MLSS system, which we are launching. And they froze again. Oh, okay. And then this continued from the new higher orientation. We covered the ruler approach for monitoring the students' feelings in the building, for the climate. We went over the backward design on how to plan for their units. And I spent some time doing a little bit of a book study. I gave some homework, quotation marks, to the new teachers. There's a book we were using in my former district. The title is How to Set Limits in the Classroom. And we chose one of the chapters that talks about how the teachers can have a different approach when teaching, not just setting clear expectations, but how not to fall into the trap of the punitive aspect of teaching, rather having a democratic approach where they need to establish those rules and reinforce them from day one. And the teachers really found it useful. So I think I will continue to use this model for the years to come. And again, one full day of math training and one full day of literacy training with the resources offered by the vendor. This is extrapolated from the feedback I received from the new hires. They found the information very useful. They thought they received the resources they needed for a successful school year, which was really nice to hear. They liked the crosswalk I spoke about between PLPs, ESTs, and so forth, and the guidance for unit development to be conformed with TRSU expectations. We spent a great amount of time talking about UDL and how our teaching strategies are actually already aligned with UDL, but if you don't look at those two documents together, you may not see the correlation between these two important documents, and also how our school improvement plans are already aligned with this UDL model. We just need to keep reinforcing it and have this message very strongly spread out, not just between the teachers and their teaching practices, but with the community and all the stakeholders. They also enjoyed the opportunity to connect with colleagues and get to meet the new hires. And overall, it was a good experience. I got a good vibe from their feedback. On August 22nd, when we had the school reopening, we met at GM in the auditorium, and we just launched the new school year by a few shorter presentations. We did a refresher on structured literacy. Lane had a nice opening talking about the growth plan for teachers. We had a review on how to keep track of student behavior from Nicolas. So it was an opportunity for all of the leaders to actually bring forward some of the work we're going to proctor and continue to monitor for the rest of the year. Special educators were trained by an expert hired by Mary Barton about the new legal updates for special education plans, and the rest of the time was dedicated to vector training. Is there a question or no? Okay. Mentoring, just an update. We have approximately 17 staff members who have been paired up with a trained mentor, whether it is a mentoring for year one or year two or a trip partner. And I think in one of my previous presentations, I showed you the difference and all the work we have done redoing the handbook. And these pairings are suggested from the mentor leaders. As you know, every school has a mentor leader, from the principal suggestions and from myself. And at this point, all the new hires have a mentor, a dedicated mentor, and mentoring actually already started. It starts from day one. During the summer, Margaret Dunn, she is our mentor trainer. She trained about 6 new mentors, and they have already taken on a mentee. And some of the things that we are trying this year is to have mentors paired up with mentees on the same discipline as theirs. So for instance, we have a new preschool teacher at Cavendish, and we paired her up with an expert, a preschool director from Ludlow. So we are trying to do this to target the needs more in detail and provide additional support. Future initiatives, I think you may have heard that during the summer there was some struggle with the allocations of tidal money. We have been on a roller coaster, literally. These funds were there one day, they disappeared by lunchtime, they were reallocated the next day. So I had several initiatives I was going to proctor and I couldn't. So just recently, I think it was at the beginning of last week, we finally heard that most of the tidal funds we had lost, they actually have been reallocated. So today at the senior management team, I was reporting out and I said to the other leaders that I would like to start proctoring some of the activities I budgeted for, but we didn't have money for. So in the next month, you will hear more about these initiatives. And if there is interest, I can actually bring you a list of the investments that have been substantially pre-approved. That's the technical language. And we look forward to develop in the next months. And I know from a previous meeting there were requests about data comparison over 3 years or 2 years for the student performance. Now, I'm not able to show you the comparison on the VCAP assessment, which is the state assessment, because those results are still embargoed. I did prepare the slides, I did prepare the data, the comparisons, the percentages, I showed Lane, but unfortunately I can't show you any of those. So I thought, how about showing you how to read some of the internal assessments, such as DBELS. And so today I'm going to spend a few minutes just showing you a nice comparison I extrapolated for you. And then I will talk to you about the trends I have seen on the VCAP analysis. We just need to be patient and wait until the state lifts the embargoes. Do you have any questions before I launch into this one? And I know Lane has copies for you, some colorful slides. If you want to look at those while I explain how to read those assessments, that would be great. Any questions?
No.
No. Okay, perfect. So let me dig into the data. So if you have your copies in front of you, the first page is the current year, is 2024-2025. The second page is data from last year. So when analyzing some data from the same cohort, we're going to look at the 2023-2024 kindergarten class, the one that has this very large red area. And then if you look at the page that says 2024-2025, you will be looking at the first grader. So 1 year later, where are these students? So how do we use the DBELS assessment? Let's start with this cohort last year, 2024, when they, at the beginning of the year, which was actually 2023, fall of 2023, the DBELS assessment had identified, and if you look at the data, 65 out of 65 students in kindergarten, 49 students in this red area, which is, if you look at the key below, is indicating these are all students that were identified as in need of intensive support for reading. Okay, so in the fall of 2023, the kindergarten class had 49 students across the entire district in need of intensive support. By the end of the year in 2024, the very class ended up with 39 students in intensive support. So we see a decrease from 49 to 39. but still a large number. Now, what happened to these students 1 year later? So let's look at the data from the past school year. So we are now on the first year cohort, 1 year later, the same students, minus or plus a few students because there's always students moving and some new students coming in and so forth. We started with 34 students identified with intensive support. We provided intensive support and targeted intervention in small groups or individual support. And we closed the year, so we are looking at this data now, with only 21 students in need of intensive support. Now, if we go back from the beginning, which was last year, the year before, we had 49 students, and 1 year later, we only have in the same cohort 21 students in need of intervention. Now, mind you, as we continue to provide intervention, this also falls into the category of identifying students with learning disabilities. So one datum that we need to identify here is, one, that our intervention system is working, as we are targeting students in small groups or individually to meet their needs. But two, we are also narrowing down the number of students who could potentially be in need of tier 3 intervention, an EST referral, or an IEP plan. So this data all flows into referrals for the EST team, which is part of our MTSS system. And yes, and I expect this to increase. So that's an example. So I put together these comparisons of cohorts for you to look at. So please, are there questions?
No, we were just taking a quick look at one of the indexes. We're good.
Okay, sorry.
I mean, so it looks to me as though we did much better in 24-25 at reducing the numbers who needed intensive and strategic support than in the previous year. Is that a correct reading of the graph?
So let me go back to, so the data you're looking at, you need to stagger them 1 year, of course, because it's the same cohort 1 year later. And we are doing much better in terms of identifying the students in need of support and targeting them individually. And the data actually shows the improvement. But after a certain year, the same cohort, you will see that those numbers are kind of stable because we are now in the presence of learning disabilities. And those are much more difficult. First of all, if it's a learning disability, it's very difficult for a student to overcome it. There is always, I don't know if you have seen the graph with the pyramid where it says a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So we're now falling into tier 3 intervention. We will continue to provide intervention. We will continue to assist the students. But at one point, there is a small percentage of students that will continue to show that gap.
Can you say something about how those numbers compare statewide? I mean, we have a lot of people who need intensive support. And is that typical for other districts, or do we have more than
No, it's pretty typical. It's pretty typical because we got better nationwide at identifying those learning disabilities. So the better we get at identifying those disabilities, the more these numbers are kind of similar. We are not any different than many other districts. And actually, our students are doing relatively well. I think in another presentation I had, I brought forward that I was very pleased to see the performance of our students in terms of maps and in terms of other assessments. Actually, our students do relatively well.
My quick look at this data anyway suggests that most of those improvements of reducing the number of students needing intensive care is getting them up to that strategic support level.
Yes.
But that there are not really differences, at least between the 2 years, in the core support and doing really well students. And it's only 2 years, so maybe that's not something to interpret, but it does seem like the improvements are more at the intensive need end rather than at the typical or higher end.
So that's exactly what I will point your attention toward, the intensive support one, because those are students that come to us from many different backgrounds, and that's where we're trying to work on immediately from day one when they enter the system. So that information is really, really useful for us because as we assess them at the very beginning of the year, we immediately start the intervention. And then slowly, if you look at the graphs, if you look at the progression, you see that the blue color, let me go back. If you look at the shift of the graphs from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and you see that this exceeding the proficiency increases, that's what we want to look at. That's where we want to be.
Great, and it looks like in 23-24, for all grades, we had 40% at the beginning of the year who were either core or either the blue or the green, and it only went up to 43 at the end of the year. So it seemed like a small change, whereas I saw 24-25, a bigger change.
Question of the data, sorry about that, is that if the grouping is the same size, the question then becomes is, are there more people in the blue now, even though the grouping is the same size than were? So did some of the yellow shift into the blue? If that's the case, then there was significant growth.
So if you look at the graphs, we also have quite some difference in the number of students. So the percentages there are skewed as well. So in the first graph, you look at 23-24, we had 344 students tested, and then this past year, we were already at 371. So that skews the percentages quite a bit. But what you want to see is the reduction of students who fall in the red area, which is the intensive support. Those are students that don't perform at grade level, they show significant gaps. You want to see the shift toward the yellow, the green, and ultimately toward the blue overall, if you add them up.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that? There more, I saw that there was more slides. I just don't want to move on it.
Other questions? I think this feels like they're all set on Dibbles. So.
Dibbles, we're going to be testing more grades. We are not going to stop at K through 4. The principals are already testing 5th and 6th graders across all the whole district. We had some of the schools weren't testing the upper grades yet, so we had some discrepancies, but now it sounds like they all want to have this assessment, and we're also building internal capacity and expertise. So now we have more people that can actually test the students. So we're actually working on making this even more efficient if possible. And this year we're also piloting the UFly, which is this other curricular resource to target intervention, and we shall see how this will reflect on the student performance.
Sarah, is there a general feeling or impression that you got from looking at the VCAT data, even though you can't give me numbers?
You're right. Actually, I almost forgot. You're right. Thank you for reminding. So for the VCAP, again, I can't show you the results, but I can tell you about the trend. So thank you for the reminder. I was like off track for a second. So as a general trend, I noticed that the ELA showed a better performance for the students in 2025 between from grades 3rd through 7th, but we saw a decline in their performance in grades 8 and 9. For math, an improved performance in grades 3 through 6, and then a decline in grades 7, 8, and 9. 7 was actually kind of the same. And then in science, it looks like the fifth graders is not the same cohort, but the same grade, because we don't have data to do the longitudinal comparison yet. The fifth graders did better this year than the previous 2 years. And then 8th and 11th grade showed a decline as compared to the same grade the 2 years past. And I think, in my opinion, from my experience also working for other districts, usually when we hit middle school and high school, you have a little bit of like senioritis where the students don't take the test seriously anymore. And that's something we need to work on. And I know the principals, especially at the high school level, are going to work on this with their own group, because it is not uncommon that students tend to rush to the assessment and not take it seriously. And it doesn't really reflect on the amount of effort the teachers put into their everyday work. It's just that the students are not really understanding that the schools are evaluated based on their performance on the state assessments, and it's something we need to work on a little more.
Yeah, I agree. There's a cultural shift that has to happen, and that was true in most districts where the kids just don't take it seriously. I think of course, you weren't here for this discussion at the beginning of last year, but I had a very strong concern that the master schedule the high school was switching to was going to cause a decline. And so one of the things I think that we need to take a look at this year to see if we can suss out if that was actually the case. They switched to a 4x4 block schedule, which, having done my dissertation on it, is not typically a good schedule for student learning. And so I've talked a little bit with John about that on and off. But I think the data, once the embargo comes off it, we can talk about it more publicly as we make shifting the master schedule to something that's going to work better.
And I think an overall comparison, not just with the state assessment, but with our local assessments, will give us a better profile of where our students are, because those are a little more targeting, and we can actually look at the profile of the student. The state assessments are a little less connected to the student everyday, schooling. What questions do you have?
I don't have any. I just have a comment to Lisa's question, just because I have the ability to look at a different data set.
Yeah.
And it's a completely different data set, obviously different humans and a different test even. But to your question about the kids in blue don't grow as much, I feel like that would be typical anecdotally. And I just went in and looked at some numbers. And so a program that I can look at is a kid who's reading 2 or 3 grades above their current grade level is expected to grow about 9 points in the test. And then I looked at a kid who is reading probably 4 or 5 years below their current grade level, and their expected growth is 34 points. So I think that says what you're coming up with is pretty typical anyways.
Yeah, there's both regression to the mean of everyone's going to go closer to the middle the more times you test them.
Right.
But also that the tests are probably designed more to detect problems than to detect growth at the higher levels. So yeah, so I'm not pointing it out as a problem so much as I think that we need to be paying attention to not just meeting proficiency and numbers meeting proficiency, but how we're serving those students who are already coming in with a lot as well. But thank you.
Yeah, no, I like that point. That I know they used to call it gifted and talented, right? I mean, probably don't use those words anymore.
No, I know.
I mean, do we do a good job of challenging and pushing kids who are, at the top or higher on the achievement scale? And, and is there more that we might do? I'm good.
Yeah, and it just takes different things to help kids who are struggling with all sorts of things. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moment to financial reports.
So this, I asked Cheryl to kind of fiddle around with this to try to find something that may be a little bit easier, so we weren't really high level with it. You always have the line by line reports that are in there, but they're difficult, I think, for most people to read. I've got a financial background in that double book accounting. I have to stop for a half hour and to kind of go through it and have a meeting myself. So basically, and we can alter this if the board wants more or wants to focus on other things, it's just this high level view of, what the overall budget is, what we spent to date, what revenues we've collected. She will also, we talked about this, if there were any concerns on a specific line, like if, we seem to be spending money faster than we should, then we may run out before the end of the year. Those are things that would be highlighted in this report. And we get extra information on. So right now we're at the start of a new school year, so there's not a lot of those quirks that would show up anyway, which is why there's not a lot there.
Yeah, I like the idea of, obviously, if you don't expect to spend a lot of money in July and August, so there's no real data there. But one way to show that would be if you had the numbers for the previous year, so you could see, as of October, as of November, we spent 37% this year, and we'd only done 34% last year. That would give you some clue.
Right, the same thing the power company does with the bar graphs of how much you spent last year and this year.
Actually, you know what? That might not be that might be a good thing to put in here for comparison.
Right, not at this level, but
Yeah, it's a little higher level.
Yeah.
But the intent in the plan is that if there's any of those quirks that come up, those will be highlighted. And again, you always have access to. Everybody does access to line items.
And we do a similar thing at the districts. Yeah, with different categories.
Yeah. So she's gonna do it for Green Mountain and London Mount Holler stuff.
No, I like it.
Who's on our reports? Board. Brings us into old business. So second read of EL 2.0 and 2.8.
Those are big. Those are look for the thickest ones in the packet. Thickest packet in the
So you had your first read last month.
And so last month, I made the comment that if I don't like the way it's all negatively written. To me, when we're really, obviously there are certain things that we don't want you to do. Things that are illegal, things that are just bad. And those, on the whole, are relatively easy to say. He did this thing and he wasn't supposed to, right? But to me, almost the more important sides of evaluating how we're doing is the stuff we do want you to do.
That's your ends report.
Right. But it seems like the way it's sort of written to focus on the things we don't, main focus seems to be on what we don't want you to do. And sometimes you bend over backwards to say, you shouldn't fail to do these things, which is really a positive, saying you want them to do them. So I guess I don't understand why some of these that are written negatively, to me, you want a mix of positive things we do want you to do and a list of negative things we don't want you to do.
So I think it's there, and it'll become a little. I had the same issue when I first saw it. It became more sensible the more I used it. So the ends report outlines the goals that the board has for the district. Those are the things that you want us to do and that you want us to accomplish. And so the ends report is a separate document. These are the limitations. This puts the guardrails around the things that we can do and can't do in trying to achieve the ends, the goals that the district has. It's a lot easier to state what you don't want us to do than to try to list out the million things that you want us to do. Plus, if you're that prescriptive, especially with a talented team like I've got with the principals and the visa, it destroys their creativity. you have to do it this way, you're stuck into it. There may be better ways to do it, but they don't have the flexibility given how those positive-based policies are written to be able to, be flexible in terms of how they're trying to achieve these ends that the board has set. But in any
Okay,
case,
so have we not yet focused on the ends? And so far, we starting with the limitations.
so the limitations are what you're working on now. The principles, I did a facilitated a day's worth of facilitated work with them in activities. They are in the process of interpreting the ends and developing the measurements to show that we are actually achieving them or not. One of the issues that we're encountering, which is kind of common, is that the measurements that they want to use are exquisitely detailed and some of them don't exist yet. And so the purpose is, okay, what data do we have out there that's generally already available that is going to tell us exactly what we need to know in terms of evaluating, are we making progress or not? And so that's kind of where they're at. They're expected to have draft copies of the ends when we meet next week. Those will then be discussed if they look good with the teachers as well, because they're the ones that are going to have to carry it out, and then they'll come in front of the board for approval. Yeah, good question. I apologize. It's been a fun week, but it's been a tiring week. So if I'm mumbling a little out of it, I apologize.
And again, it just seems odd to say the superintendent shall not neglect to submit. Instead of saying the superintendent shall submit. Okay.
So that-
Yeah, so, I mean,
like there was one
Janine- what's her
strikeout
name?
here. I don't. Janine, yeah.
Janine. I mean, I think she had a really good way of explaining it, and I wish I could say it as eloquently as she could, but I had the same issue, and we talked about it. I remember we were in Cavendish, and she just said it's that we want to have sort of the bars at the bottom with the limitations and the bars at the top with the end report and have a lot of flexibility in the middle. And so that was her reasoning for having it in that negative sort of format.
Yeah, I wasn't on the board then.
Yeah, right. It was right before that, right?
Okay. All right. I won't dwell on it.
Just the only I saw this strikeout was that something that was in the interpretation of that something from the last meeting.
Yeah, that was
Words.
what was brought up, that it seemed too much expectation.
Okay. All right.
And I actually agree with it.
So the change in the GM wanting our board changed here. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, we had the discussion of the tier issues.
We did, yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Didn't know, so I wasn't here. Right. So in looking at it for your second read, is there any other changes, concerns?
And so your basic role is a couple of questions. The first is, is the interpretation reasonable based upon what you gave us as a policy? Right, because you can't fault us if it's reasonable. But if our interpretation isn't getting you where you want to go, then it becomes the board responsibility to change that part of the policy. So that tightens things up so that we have to change our interpretation. So it's a weird process, but it actually ends up with a lot of good discussion and a lot of deep thinking, which is beneficial.
And if we are happy with it, we need to have official motion to accept the interpretation.
Yes.
I move to accept the interpretation of policy 2.0 Blue Wilkins Street.
There a second for 2.0? A second.
Yes, sorry, I heard something totally different, and I will second that.
Good. All right, all in favor of adopting EL executive limitation 2.0?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted that.
And they can always be changed, right? There's things about the educational environment change, and so you can change them, as they come together as the board figured, hey, you know, this we got to update because this is happening. This is happening. Or it's not quite getting us where we want to be.
Moving on to 2.8, which is much larger. Jim, a minute or two, or did you read it prior to coming? In regards to any changes before adoption.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor.
You good?
Yeah, all right.
I move to accept policy 2.8 and its interpretation as reasonable.
You second?
Yeah, I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll adopt 2.8, executive limitation 2.8. All right, it looks like that brings us to numerous mandatory policy updates.
So no new staff contracts to consider. Just in terms of the next two executive limitation policies, there's 2.1 and 2.2 that are in there. Took a little while to get those updated. They're also in the shared file. There should be hopefully it's. But those, you know, this is the first kind of presentation of them, so it would be important to, you know, do a deep read if you can and come back with feedback or decide that it's good for the next round. The mandated policies, what Sydney and I have been doing was that when we converted over the website, the district website, and started to kind of revamp it a little bit based upon some feedback from one of the other board committees, was that some things were missing and some things hadn't been updated in a while. And so we figured since we got a new website up there, we're putting the mandated policies up there. It's probably good just to redo them all based upon, you know, the most current update from the Vermont School Boards Association. So each and every one of these uses the School Board Association recommended language, which is typically developed by Pietro's group. Most folks have kind of interacted with Pietro at this point in time. The only difference is right, we put in the pertinent information about TRSU. So I'm happy to answer any questions on them, but like I said, they're mandated. They're just stuff we got to do. There's not a heck of a lot we're going to change about it. But we still have to go through the pro forma active for approval.
So this will be the first read of all of these?
Yeah.
Correct? Right. And up to you if you want to look through them now or come back.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, I'm good with them being posted for a second grade. I don't have any questions on any of them. I do have one comment.
Mhm.
When you go to the website and you try to look up board policies, it's
Oh, you
kind of a chore.
you got to click on policy.
Well, you know, I can find them. I mean, because I know where they are, but sometimes when I'm looking for a policy that I know by name and not number, it's like a policy. I don't know what a policy, and you know,
So
I'm probably more familiar with them. No, when you just go to policies, this is what comes up. So like you go to A policies, and then you're like, oh, A1 is conflict of interest, A23 is community
Are
engagement.
you on the old website? Click back to the opening, the landing page.
Is there an index?
Yeah, that's he separated them by, you know, A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
But he should probably, and I'll talk with him, we can put on there what those categories are.
Right. I mean, I think for the general public, board member conflict of interest is, we're going to be looking for that somehow searchable. I mean, I went on a couple days ago to look for a specific policy.
Yep.
And I still haven't found it.
Yeah, I mean, let me see what we can figure out. But it is a work in progress, especially
Right.
that new.
And I know you're doing other things and I don't expect it, but I do think if people are wanting to look for policy, the letter of that policy is meaningless to most people.
Yeah, and work in progress means we want the feedback so we can change it. Yeah.
Right.
Index, I think would be.
Yeah, just, table of contents and link up, right? Would be great.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, if you guys are all okay with that, bringing back the
Yes.
seats for I'm sorry, 9 for second read. Okay. All right, that brings us to an update, on the Rural School Community Alliance.
I think it's been a quiet month, so we had a pretty thorough discussion a month ago. The one thing we had talked about was asking Wayne to reach out to other neighboring superintendents to start informal conversations about what.
And then the Rural Alliance solved that problem for me.
Okay,
That first meeting's Friday the 19th at 1.
okay, so you'll be able to do that. Good. Yeah, so the Rural Alliance decided to at least get the Rural Alliance superintendents together on a Zoom call.
I think I'll double check the list. I think it is the majority of us in the southern districts.
I think everybody was invited, whether they were in the alliance or not.
Open to the public.
Yeah. I also the approved statement to the redistricting committee that was sent to the redistricting committee. So that communication, if I get any kind of feedback, I'll.
I will say that next week I'm going to ask the select board in Mount Holly to approve a similar resolution. So that, that the commission gets the idea that it's not only school boards, who want to keep things the way they already are, but it's of interest to people who are, who aren't as slightly involved as we are.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Oh, definitely not our town, what happens in schools.
No, but I'm hopeful at least that the select board will want to keep some local control over the schools and not let people in Springfield or Whitewood Junction run our schools for us.
I'll be interested to see if I actually get an email back on the communications we sent on behalf of the board, because I think that'll be very common. If we don't get one, it means that it's potentially maybe they've heard it, but I would feel that it means that probably not taking it too seriously. And so there is a pretty good crew of people familiar with it on that.
Could you somehow make that meeting public or like an announcement of that meeting so that I feel like that would be pretty important public for example.
Well, it's somewhat related. The BSBA is having their regional meetings. I don't remember the date. Sometime toward the end of
Last 2 days of October.
Okay.
Well,
No, that's the big meeting, but they're a regional meeting. The regional meetings are in September.
Yeah.
September 11th. It's probably September 11th because that's the first meeting up at Killington of all the superintendents.
Okay, I think there's a September 11th meeting to discuss the resolutions. And the TRSU didn't, but the Mount Holly board submitted a resolution asking BSBA to basically be more attentive to rural districts.
Yeah, that's September 30th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting. That's the VSBA regional meeting.
Right.
Yeah. So essentially,
Yep, September 30th.
yeah. If they sent the announcement, they usually send it out a bunch of times. But they sent it out.
I think it was today.
Right. No, it just came in a day or two, a couple of days. There was an earlier notice about it. The one just
The
came.
one I read, but
We've also got
I think they're asking you to register for it in advance.
Yeah.
In order to get the link.
okay.
And there's also the other place. So I'll be able to come back with a tone and tenor of where the superintendents are at, the other districts are at after that meeting. I'm going to attend the VASO, which is the business officers meeting for all the business. My brain is not working today. For all the Cheryls across the state, we'll get together, and that'll also provide some input into what people. We'll be able to bring back to the board.
All right, if there's no more discussion on that, that'll bring us to the last public comment.
Just shot me.
Anything, Amber?
On the side, and we much want to consider of, you know, and side improvements and all that, so perhaps, whatever.
That brings us to board comment. Anybody? Scott?
Negative.
All right, so future meetings and agenda items. Is there anything that you are wanting on next month's agenda right off?
Budget overview.
Yeah, got it on the clip.
Wouldn't that be a good one then, Cheryl?
I got used to having to do all of it. It's kind of funny now that I don't have to. I'm not as in tune with everything that's going on, but I got people I can trust. Insurance is a good one. Good egg.
Great, so if there's nothing else right off, that brings us to our next meeting, which is October 2nd. PM Cavendish. And we'll do our self-evaluation. Board members are given and have read the agenda, background materials prior to the meeting.
Yes.
Board members are respectful to each other, the public, and the administration.
Yes.
Always.
Board members handle conflict openly and constructively.
Yep.
Tonight? I said, I think so tonight.
Board members focus on the role and responsibility of the board.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Team, once the decision is made, and work collaboratively throughout the decision.
Yes.
So with that,
I'll make a motion, adjourn.
Second.
I beat you to it, Scott.
Thank you.
Always gotta go.
favor, adjourned at 7:20.